Welcome to the Emotional Eating Unwrapped podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, an emotional eating and weight loss coach for women looking to fall in love with eating, create healthy attachments with food, and lose weight sustainably. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and I am so happy to be here with you today because we are 1 year into our podcast, and it's crazy. I can't believe it. I can't believe that we've done 50, I think this is our 54th or 55th episode, and I'm really proud of us because I think we've done such a good job talking about emotional eating, but also talking about healing and really trying to get the narrative and the belief and the recognition that healing emotional eating isn't just about food. It's not just about weight, even though those things matter, right? We do want to lose weight. We do want to feel in control of food, and those are important. But it's also about understanding the things that drive us to emotionally eat in the first place. It's about understanding the behaviors that don't serve us anymore and starting to bring awareness to that. And that was such a big intention and motivation and goal I had for the podcast when I started it, was to really educate women to recognize that so much of what we've been conditioned to believe about ourselves and the narratives that we've taken on from society, from our caregivers, from our own internal self-talk, so much of those things influence the way that we relate to food, the way we relate to our bodies, and really just giving you the tools and the insights to recognize that healing isn't simply just going to be a food program or understanding the root causes per se, right? Or finally being able to say, yes, oh my God, I was treated badly. But to be able to take ownership and then find a forgiveness within yourself for the length of time that maybe you've been behaving from that place, and to move forward with empowerment, and to move forward without shame, to move forward with an ability to receive pleasure and to live free. And so I'm just so happy that you've been here with us, with me for the last year. And today we're going to do more deep diving. We're going to talk more about two of the biggest triggers that guide or drive people to emotionally eat. And those two things we're going to talk about today are people pleasing and perfectionism. And if you're like me, you may have realized at first how connected these habits are to your relationship with food. Well, you might not have realized, right? So if you're like me in the beginning, so now I realize it because it's still something that I deal with. When I feel the urgency to turn to food, which, as you've heard me say before, healing from emotional eating doesn't mean you never want to emotionally eat. It just means that you have the ability to recognize the feeling of wanting to emotionally eat, and you could pivot and move that energy into a different place. That is a sign of recovery. So if you're like me, you might not have realized at first how connected people pleasing and perfectionism are to your relationship with food. It took me a while to realize that. But once I started to dig deep, once I started looking closer, it's all there. It's all woven together. Perfectionism and people pleasing are really two sides of the same coin. So I want to break it down a little bit more and talk about why people pleasing and perfectionism often end up leading to emotional eating, and how we can start to shift out of these patterns. So I'm going to start with people pleasing because I think that might be something that more people recognize within themselves. I think perfectionism is still something that society sometimes sees as good. I think it's for us to realize when it goes too far, but I'm going to start with people pleasing. And the definition of people pleasing, or one of the definitions, it might be a simplistic definition of people pleasing, is feeling like you're only valuable if you are making other people happy. And so what does that look like in real life? So it means you have difficulty saying no. It means you feel guilty for even thinking about setting a boundary, right? Even when you think about setting a boundary, you get anxiety and you feel like you pre-guilt yourself essentially. And you seek validation by meeting others' expectations while neglecting yourself, right? While neglecting your own needs, whether that's conscious or unconscious. And so what happens then, right? In real life, what happens when you do that? You get to the end of the day, you're drained. You've spent all your energy making sure that everyone else is okay. You've met their standards. You've done everything you can to avoid disappointing everyone. And what is left for you at the end of the day? Usually nothing. And this can be something that is totally unconscious, right? You can just think you're tired. And so I think a big pause here in the talking about this is that you want to start recognizing the difference between being just tired because of your own energy and effort, or being exhausted because you have neglected yourself. So this is something that you want to start to recognize within yourself, because this is where the food ends up coming in. This is where eating becomes an attractive escape, right? Eating becomes an attractive escape for you. You get home and maybe you could tell yourself, I deserve this, right? You tell yourself, I deserve this. You've been on your feet, running around. You've been trying to make everyone else happy. And food becomes a reward. And at the end of the day, you're like, it's not really about the food though, right? Why are you having this food? And so I'm actually not knocking on food as a reward on occasion, right? Like if you get a big promotion, or I don't know, something happens, like you got something like a big life event happens and you want to celebrate with eating or food, that's something different. That's something that's intentional. But this is less intentional, right? You're coming home and you're turning to food because you're tired to fill something. And it's usually the part of yourself that's been neglected all day while you've been catering to everyone else. But here's the thing, and you might already know this, but the food is going to only feel soothing and comforting for a very short amount of time, because it doesn't feel the deeper need. And what is that deeper need? And I think it's really important that we name these deeper needs. And everybody listening is going to have their own unique deeper need. But I think that, and I'm pretty confident actually, that many of them fall under the need for self-care, the need for respect, the need for appreciation, and the need for acknowledging your own worth and value besides what you can do for others. Okay, so it's really important that we start to see this pattern. And then when we move to perfectionism, which is another trigger that can go hand in hand with the emotional eating habit, perfectionism is all about setting these impossibly high standards for yourself. It's that all or nothing thinking. Either you do it perfectly or you've completely failed. You then procrastinate, you're afraid of making a mistake. And when you do take action, you're constantly worried that it won't be right, it won't measure up. And when you feel like you're falling short, harsh self-judgment will kick in. And oftentimes with perfectionists, it's never going to be enough. There's always going to be something that you think you remember that you forgot to do, or you notice someone's reaction to what you did that you thought was good, and you forget about that what you did was good, and you hyper focus on that person's response or lack of response, and therefore you go down a rabbit hole of thinking that it was wrong, right? There's so many things. I remember this cycle so well, right? I am a recovering people pleaser and a recovering perfectionist, even to this day. And when I was less aware of it, and when I was just starting to heal from it, I would set these sky high standards for myself. And they were, whether it was conscious or subconscious. And the moment I didn't meet the standards, whether it was related to work, whether it was relationships, even how I responded to someone via text, right? Like I remember one time, I think I responded to somebody like looking forward to it. And I freaked out because for like 2 days, I was like, should I just have said looking forward instead of looking forward to it? Like, did looking forward to it sound too weird? Like, I just hyper analyzed every single thing that I did. So every time that I put myself out there, that I took an action, whether it was related to my body, relationships, work, ultimately it would trigger this sense of not good enough, and I would turn to food. I would want food as comfort, and then I would also want food. I'd kind of like use food to punish myself and to drown myself, to numb, to like hide more. And then what would happen is the overeating would happen, right? Like the binging would happen, the cycle would happen. That familiar guilt would set in. And then the standard became getting more stricter with myself with food, right? So then I put myself in a position with food again that was like a comfortable place to have these control levers that I now could focus on being strict with myself again, right? I would be like, okay, you did so badly, you hit this rock bottom, you let yourself go, and then I would then put more strict rules on myself. I don't know if you can relate to that. Please let me know in the comments if you can relate to this, because it always makes other people feel better to know that there's other people like them out there. And I know for me, it finally made me feel better when I knew that other people were feeling similarly. And this is where people pleasing and perfectionism overlap, right? They feed off each other. So you're trying to maintain these impossibly high standards for yourself, and you are maintaining these impossibly high standards for other people. Right? You're seeking validation from everyone around you, thinking if I can just do everything perfectly, maybe I'll finally feel enough. And you also have these high expectations for other people that when they don't meet those expectations, you think they're rejecting you, right? So there's this really kind of crazy push and pull with both of these things. But here is the truth with perfectionism, right? With perfectionism, there's no finish line. There's never going to be a place where you're like, it's good enough. The bar is always moving, right? Every time there's always going to be a little nuance within some sort of action, within some sort of idea or behavior or something that you do that you didn't think of ahead of time that you're going to hyper focus on, and that it's going to make it not good enough. That's just what perfectionism does. It's insidious that way. And then it triggers that feeling of insecurity, that feeling of anxiety, that feeling of like, oh, I want to escape this feeling, you just pulls you out of your center. And the next thing you know, food is where you turn to for that comfort. Food is where you turn to make the feeling of not being good enough go away, right? To stuff that down. And it just becomes a really, really painful cycle. And so how do we start breaking free from this? Okay, let's talk about this, right? It's good to understand the why, but how do we start breaking free from this? So first, it's about deconstructing the narrative that we've been telling ourselves, the one that says, I have to be perfect to be worthy. I have to be perfect to be lovable. I have to make everyone else happy before I can take care of myself or prioritize myself. Otherwise, I'll be exiled or told I'm selfish or, essentially we're like as humans, one of our biggest fears is not belonging somewhere, is being lonely, is being alone. And I think that that's such a really, really important thing to recognize, is that we're so primitively ingrained not to be alone that we're willing to abandon ourselves for it, even when both things could live. If you have the skills, right? Like you can put up a boundary, take care of yourself, prioritize yourself, and also be in community. You can also belong. You can also have connection. But sometimes it is more of a skill to learn. But it is 100% possible. So the first thing we have to do is believe that we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to people please all the time. We need to start shifting from this all or nothing thinking into something that I like to call good enough thinking, right? Like I'm good enough. It sounds really simple, but it's really transformative. And what good enough essentially really means is that perfection isn't the goal. It's about progress. It's about balance. It's about showing up for yourself in small, measurable ways that you can walk away being like, yeah, I did a good job. And other circumstances might have happened around that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I did a good job and I can't control every circumstance. Okay. So, for example, instead of setting an expectation that you'll do everything perfectly at work, instead of setting the expectation that you're going to be like the perfect person at home or you're going to be perfect with food, start by setting more neutral balance goals. Ask yourself, what can I do today? What can I do today that's nourishing, that's not too heavy of a lift, that gives me a sense of accomplishment without feeling like I've pulled myself out of my center, I've burnt myself out, I've ignored myself or abandoned myself? So this could mean saying no to something that maybe if you asked yourself deep down if you wanted to do it, or like, it was really it was a no, but you kind of brushed it aside and was like, I can do it. But instead you don't. Instead you say no. What if you made a mistake or put yourself out there and didn't get the reaction that you wanted? And you didn't spiral into self-criticism. And instead you made the effort be the success, right? What if you had like this massive list or like this massive project that you wanted to get done or this big idea, and instead of just not getting started at all because you can't imagine it all getting done, you just focus on one little thing. And again, the action is the success. And when it comes to food, this mindset shift helps so much with then how you relate to food and eating. Because instead of then using food as a reward or punishment, you end up seeing food for what it is, which is a neutral vehicle. Food is a neutral vehicle for nourishment, right? I'm not going to say like some people in my field say like it should just be functional. Learn how to see food as completely functional eating. I don't agree. I think that food should be neutral, and it's nice if you can a good amount of the time be able to engage with food without charge and just have it be neutral and eat foods that are going to be nourishing for your body and nourishing for your hormones and for your organs and everything like that. But I also think that food should be appreciated for its pleasure, right? I'm a big fan that like you can enjoy the sensual experience of food. You can enjoy the sensations of food. But you and I both know that when you're binging or when you're using food as a coping mechanism, you're not actually enjoying the sensations of it. You're exploiting it for a different purpose. You're exploiting it to meet unmet needs, whether that's the need for validation, whether that's the need for connection, or whether that's the need for genuine rest. So what happens is when you start addressing these needs directly, when you start acknowledging them within yourself and then curating your life and your relational dynamics and your communication around getting these needs met, food doesn't have to then play a role of the comfort for us. And it doesn't have to play a role as something that we fear. It doesn't have to be an enemy for us. It could just be something that we decide to have or not. It can be something that we decide to take pleasure from or not. And we could walk away from any of those decisions feeling empowered. And before I close the episode for today, I want to emphasize that people-pleasing and perfectionism, if you are listening to this and you're like, I have this, these are parts of my personality, these are patterns that we've likely developed over a lifetime. Okay, they're not going to disappear overnight. And that is completely okay. Because the goal isn't to be perfect at not being a perfectionist, right? Like we don't want to now have to never be a perfectionist. Right? Because there are certain parts of being a perfectionist, there are certain characteristics of being a perfectionist that might actually be really beneficial for your life. And so we don't want to try to be perfect at not being a people pleaser, or be perfect at not being a perfectionist, because that's just the same thing in a new disguise, right? That's the same perfectionism in a different disguise. So instead, it's about making small intentional changes to the way that we treat ourselves, starting first with self-awareness. First, recognizing if you have these patterns, then noticing where in your life they're most triggered. And then you want to just start to see these things earlier and earlier and make a different decision. But it starts first with self-awareness. Because once you have the self-awareness and once you are familiar with the way that being a perfectionist feels in your body, the way that being a people pleaser feels in your body, you can make a different choice. You could choose to say no to something that drains you. You could choose to let yourself off the hook for not doing everything perfectly. You can choose to not take on anxiety or self-criticism for not saying the text in the way that you thought maybe you had to say it, right? Maybe that's just for me. Maybe you start to recognize the moments when you reach for food because you're not hungry, but because you're stressed, because you're tired, because you maybe neglected yourself a little bit, did something that you didn't really want to do, abandon yourself. And these are really good things to know, right? Just starting to collect this awareness and this feeling tone in your body of what does it feel like when I'm people pleasing? What does it feel like when I'm being a perfectionist? And then you can ask yourself, what do I really need right now? And so when you start to unravel these patterns, you'll notice something really powerful, that food becomes less charged, becomes less of an emotional crutch, and life as a whole just begins to feel lighter. Food doesn't feel like something you have to obsess over or control. It doesn't feel like something you need, like that you need some sort of major program to be able to engage with for, right? The pressure to be perfect starts to fade. You start to give yourself a little room to, to enjoy. You begin to realize that you're enough exactly as you are, right? And so this is what we really want. We want to be able to live in a space of neutrality and also a fluidity. Right? We want to be able to not need to have such black and white ways of being. Okay? And I want to share something very exciting for you. So if you like this episode, if you've been listening for a while and you've been curious about how to work with me, or maybe you have explored ways to work with me before, it wasn't something that was within what you were needing, I am excited to invite you to my new Eat Freely, Live Fully mentorship, which is a new support system experience with me. And it has coaching, accountability, momentum, and it's designed to help you understand your food triggers, reconnect with your hunger and fullness cues, and learn to truly eat whatever you want without rules. We're going to learn how to regulate your emotions. So more going deeper into stuff that we talk about on the podcast so that you can naturally lose weight. You can naturally balance your hormones and you can live with freedom. You can live with joy. You can live with fluidity. And we do this all without macros, without deprivation, without medications. And the best part for right now, you can try it out for $33 for 30 days. So $33 for 30 days of coaching, accountability, and momentum with me, right? There's weekly, there's monthly, there's so much in the mentorship, and there's no strings attached. So if after the 30 days it's not for you, you can just go on your way. I have some bonuses in there, including module 1 of my emotional eating solution and my sober eating method playbook. That's there too. So, and you get to keep those. So even if you decide it's not for you, you still get to keep those. So all you need to do is click the link in the show notes for the details. You could check it out. All right. And that's it for me for today. So have a great week. I want you to remember that whatever you're working towards, however you want to feel in your life, you can do it. You are worth it. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.